Jobs recovery, surging commodity prices and booming revenues will see the government's $1 trillion debt revised down in the March budget. The second phase of the Treasurer's fiscal strategy will shift to debt reduction after 2 years of pandemic spending and will signal possible tax cuts within a few years. Josh Frydenberg telling the Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry event the government is aiming to use revenue to stabilise the bottom line. Strong prices for iron ore and coal, plus February's unemployment rate dropping to a 14-year low of 4%, has reduced, or will reduce once we know it, the $99 billion deficit.
The Australian economy has recovered strongly and now has real momentum. The initial phase of our fiscal strategy has delivered on its objective, with full employment in sight.
Let's bring in Jane Hume, the Minister for Superannuation and Financial Services, and as well for women's economic security. Thanks very much for your time. Let's start on the unemployment rate. I'm sure you're not devastated to be taken through that particular figure. But tell me this, I mean, the biggest factor to this being 4% surely is the hundreds of billions of dollars of stimulus the government's pumped into the economy.
That has in fact worked, Tom, because now businesses are booming. They're looking for more employees, and we're seeing unemployment fall to 4% for the first time since 2008. And any time it's been lower than that, the last time it was lower than that was 1974. It's quite extraordinary. You know, I think I'm showing my age here, but when I was at university, 5% unemployment was considered full employment. We're now talking about, and both Treasury and the RBA are forecasting unemployment with a 3 in front of it by the middle of this year. This is really encouraging because, of course, the more people that we have in work, the more people that are paying taxes, that's improving government revenues. And of course, it's it's a good sign for a growing economy too. It maintains momentum, so that we're on the right track. That clearly, the government's economic plan is working to reduce taxes, reduce red tape, to provide incentives, and also to improve those productivity drivers, things like infrastructure investment, investment in skills, in the digital economy, in our modern manufacturing strategy, and of course in reducing energy prices as well.
So yeah, look, everyone gets why there was such a huge amount of money spent because of COVID, and a lot of it was shoveling money out the door to make sure that if there was a huge hit, that there were longer lockdowns and major recessions, that that the government was responding effectively. But at the same time, if any government over the last 10 years had spent this much money, we would have dramatically brought down the unemployment rate.
Well, I think we were facing an extraordinary period of crisis and uncertainty, and the government's response, importantly, was to make sure that we maintained people's connections to the workplace. That was the point of JobKeeper, and clearly it has worked. Not only that, but we're now seeing new jobs being created. In fact, there are now 13.37 million Australians in work, and that is around 370,000 more people in work today than were before the pandemic, which is terrific news. So we haven't just connected people to their workforce, to their workplaces, and kept those connections. There are new jobs being created as well. Now, I think that that's a good news story.
It is. I'm not saying it isn't. I'm just saying perhaps it would have been achieved if anyone spent this amount of money. It's a whopping amount of money. Let's move to fiscal strategy, though, because the Treasurer is doing this, albeit a little later than he initially said he would. Are you willing to be upfront enough with voters and say this will mean some spending cuts?
Well, I think that the most important thing we can do now is make sure that we are supporting voters, we're supporting all Australians throughout this period of recovery and back into business as usual phase. And I don't think that necessarily involves cuts, certainly. In fact, we've already alleviated the cost of living with things like tax cuts. There's around $30 billion of tax cuts that have already been made. They are being fed into Australians' pockets each month to the tune of about $1.5 billion. We've increased the subsidies to childcare, which has made childcare more affordable. And of course, energy prices have dropped around 7% in the last 2 years alone, very different from the conversations that we've had at previous elections, where energy prices have been
In terms of this strategy, though, I mean, we previously had the coalition, casting a very sharp eye over the budget for any wasteful spending. You say you're good economic managers. and that Labor's wasteful with spending, won't you at least have to look very carefully at all areas of the budget, given we're headed towards close to $1 trillion in debt?
Oh, exactly, and we always do, and we always have. Even during that period of enormous uncertainty at the beginning of 2020, every single one of those measures that were part of whether the stimulus package, the safety net package, or the JobKeeper package were developed within a framework that everything had to be proportionate, it had to be targeted, it had to be temporary, and most importantly, had to be delivered on the existing tax and transfer rails, because that's how you get money out the door faster to where it's needed the most in the most cost-effective way. So yes, it was enormous amounts of money, but at the same time, it was done within that framework to make sure that it was targeted and went to where it was needed the most.
We'll see perhaps March 29 if the fiscal discipline is starting just yet, or if it's a bit too hard ahead of an election. Let me ask you about your area of superannuation though. So the retirement income review that the government asked for did recommend those on government parental leave get superannuation, but you're not going ahead with that. Why not?
Well, actually, the Retirement Income Review, which was a 600-page review of the entire retirement income system, not just superannuation, also aged care and assets outside of superannuation, said that the best way to improve retirement outcomes was better interaction between those three pillars of age, pension, superannuation and assets outside of income. It did note that it didn't actually make recommendations. I should be very clear on that, Tom. Yes, it did say that because the superannuation system was, let's face it, never set up with women in mind, it would always be a reflection of working life, that there were going to be basic inequities in that. And one of them is when women go on, take time out from the workforce, that they are not contributing to superannuation. Now, paid parental leave has gone some way to alleviate the income pressures when women take time out from the workforce to have a child, but superannuation isn't included on that.
Yeah, but okay, so what do you say to someone, in particular, that mostly women still at the moment, going on leave and they won't get superannuation? They ask you, why not?
Well, it's a very costly exercise. It's probably to the tune of around $250 million every year in order to pay superannuation on paid parental leave, which is there, let's face it, paid parental leave, paid by the government, is there to make sure that women can take time out from the workforce without being penalised.
So it's not, but that just shows it's not a priority
during that period of time.
Reducing that gap for women compared to men is not a priority then.
No, that's not true at all, and you know that, Tom. In fact, we've made a number of changes to superannuation system in the last 3 years. We've made a number of changes in the last few years to allow women to be able to contribute more to superannuation when they have the capacity to do so. And for low-income women, we've actually removed that $450 per month threshold.
But cost, you're saying it's cost, and cost is priority.
Australian women.
Cost always comes down to priority.
Well, I'm saying that superannuation on paid parental leave would be a terrific thing to have. However, all budgets are made up of decisions that need to be made and priorities that need to be taken. I note that the opposition
Did you push for it?
Had a similar discussion. Well, I'm not going to talk about budget deliberations, of course, Tom. I'm not going to talk about budget deliberations, Tom. What I can say is that this government has done more for all Australians contributing to superannuation, and particularly women, with things like catch-up contributions, downsizer contributions, changing the work test, so that people, and including women, and particularly women, can contribute more to superannuation when they are able to do so.